Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. We're going to have another different discussion today. I have Viv with me, who used to be a head teacher. She now runs a coaching company and she's written a couple of books. So a fountain of knowledge, but we're going to be digging into how we treat ourselves and what happens if we get ill and how are we treating others and so much more. So let's dive straight in. Viv, welcome. Why don't you tell everyone about yourself?
Thank you, Rowena. Why don't I tell everyone about myself? It's always when someone asks me that question, it's like, well, where do I start with that? You have people who are really rehearsed in terms of how they start. So I'm going to start off with, first of all, I am a mother. And actually, that is really important within the context of how I show up and how I work with school leaders. Yes, I have a role as a former head teacher, turned around a failing primary school. Yes, I am director of integrity coaching. And I am a whole human being. And part of that is I am a mum. And I have 3 children who were young when I became a head. One was just about to be born. But that's who I am. I'm a person in the round. But I'm also an individual who cares passionately about this profession and wanting educators to feel really well in the role and have an elevated understanding of what that means.
Wow. I guess I want to dig straight into something you've said, because I think very few of us would even consider our response to my question.
Mm.
And your response saying, I'm a whole person,
Mm.
and primarily I'm a mum,
Yeah,
because I wonder for people listening where that comes in their to-do list and
yeah,
whether they've ever considered
yeah,
where that or where they
yeah.
or where their parenthood or
Mm.
their family or other things or their health even
Mm.
comes in their list. So I love that you've started us with
Mm.
a big question actually for listeners.
Yeah. And I suppose, my response to you there, Rowena, is because I feel that this profession, it encourages us to compartmentalize who we are. So you get ready for work. You put on your work suit, your teacher suit, your leader suit, and that's who you are. But what I talk about, what my associates talk about, is that we teach and we lead out of who we are. It's not just our technical competence that shows up in the classroom or in the staff room. It's everything that we are bringing with us that has shaped us. And we're not good, I feel anyway, in the education sector, about making spaces for that. When I say there are good reasons as to why, I'm not saying that the system has thought about it. What I'm saying there are good systems as to what reasons as to why people protect themselves and don't always bring their full selves into the workplace, because the workplace doesn't necessarily always encourage it. That's what I'm saying there.
Oh, can you explain that?
Yeah, I can. If you're working, well, very often we will get calls from head teachers, senior school leaders, because they're facing some kind of stress, some kind of burnout. And when we have the conversation, it will come as no surprise probably to some of your listeners. It's because they're working in a very toxic environment. Now, showing up as your full self should mean that you can go into work and be able to talk about just what matters to you, who you are as a person, your vision, your purpose. But if you're working in an environment that just sees you almost as someone like spokes in a wheel, and you're just there to perform a function, then what happens is the conversations aren't to do with your why, your motivation, who you are. They're more to do with outcome and results. And I know from my own experience working with school leaders and when I was a head teacher myself, that those conversations, what they do is they force our ego to just get bigger and bigger to protect ourselves. So we have this force field, but that force field then means we disconnect with ourselves and what we're feeling because we're going into survival mode. And really, we should be talking about thriving, what it takes for us to thrive. So that's what I mean when I say that, Rowena.
Yeah. And, that breaks my heart really, because I think that's exactly where I was when I burnt out about 3 years ago.
Mm.
And I wrote about it in my book, talking about describing it as, are you an unseen cog in a massive machine? And you go into automatic pilot to do your job rather than being that whole human you're talking about. Do you want to tell listeners a little bit about your story, Viv, how you've got here?
Okay, my story, I'm trying to keep it really short. So I've been in education now around over 30 years. I never, ever imagined one day I would be a head teacher. Part of the reason is that I faced a lot of racism when I was growing up. And my secondary school teachers told me that when I said I wanted to be a nursery nurse, my careers teacher said that was too high an aspiration and I should consider being a cashier at the local supermarket. Wow. So, unbeknown to most people, I struggled with self-doubt for a long time, but I was very good at being smiley Viv, happy Viv. Again, that was what I sort of projected into the world as a way to hide what was going on inside. And then, to cut a long story short, I was appointed head teacher. I'd only been deputy at that school for less than a year. I mean, it's a crazy story because I've been deputy at that school for less than a year. It was at the time when, this tells you how old I am, because it's when Ofsted was first introduced. So no one knew what to expect, but I loved the head teacher. I loved her with a passion. We were going to turn this school around. But then Ofsted came, and like many schools at the time, we were failed and we were put into special measures. She was like, Viv, I'm going to go. I'm crying. No, you can't. We're going to leave this school together. She goes. We have a series of acting heads who don't care about the school, who don't care about the community. I do. But as a young, fresh deputy head teacher, I'm busy doing everything, telling them this is what you need to do with the action plan. I'm going to go and teach my class now, and I'll come back and check on you. This is the acting head teacher at the end of a full day. Then after a year, the governor said to me, Viv, we're going to advertise for the substantive post. You've been deputy a year now. We can see the difference that you're making. We'd like you to apply for the post. I'm like, no. That's not part of the plan. I'm 8.5 months pregnant. No, I was 6 months pregnant at the time. I know. This is how bonkers it is, Marina. I was 6 months pregnant at the time with my first child. So in my head, I'm like, no. This isn't part of the plan. But then one of the young people in the school, he came to me and he was like, Miss Grant, are we failures? And if any of you, listeners or yourself have worked in a school that's in a category, you know how it impacts the whole community. And it really did spark something in me when he said that, because I really wasn't intent on applying for the headship, even despite what the governors had said. But I recognizing what he had said to me, an echo of what had been said to me when I was at secondary school. I'm a failure, I'm not going to achieve, I'm not going to amount to anything. And here was someone, child, only 9 at the time, asking one if we were failures, but almost, believing that because of that category. But also, he then said, Miss, are you going to be our head? And I'm like, what do you mean? Am I going to be your head teacher? Yeah, but Miss, you love us. You know, all this stuff that kids know. And I'm like, my heartstrings. But then I spoke to my family and so forth and friends, and they were just like, Viv, just go for it. Just see. So, and this is no word of a lie, Rowena. At 8.5 months pregnant, I went for the interview. My little Isaac kicking in my stomach at that time. But they appointed me. And I took up the substantive post when Isaac was 5 months old. And then just trying to keep the story really short, I really threw myself into the role. I'm not the Viv Grant, obviously, the Viv Grant then that I am now. And decisions that I made in those early days, I never, ever would make now. And the insight that I have about leadership, if I'd had it then, just a small amount, what happened to me then that put me onto this trail of coaching for heads never would have happened. But again, I suppose with all life experiences, there's purpose in them if we can find them. So essentially what happened, Rowena, I did a home visit. I never should have done this home visit. I was tired. I was exhausted. I'd got used to seeing myself in a particular way. There's work that we do with school leaders around drivers. I have a key one, which is called Be Strong. If you're a Be Strong, you're very good at hiding your emotions. You're very good at telling yourself a narrative. Carry on. You're okay. You don't readily display your emotions to other people or ask for help. That was me back then. I'm better now. But back then, I didn't realize that driver was driving my behavior. Say, go and do this home visit. It's late at night. It doesn't matter, Viv. You can do this. Long story short, did this home visit. Parents shouted at me, swore at me, told me in no uncertain terms, who was I to be telling her how to raise her child? Everyone knew I just had a baby. Everyone knew. So where was I for my child? A colleague with me saw the look on my face, got to my car, cried, and really, that was the start. I wouldn't have known it then, but it put me on the journey that I am on now, or towards, when we set up the company, which wasn't till a long time afterwards. But I just remember being so devastated. I can't really tell you, Rowena, just how, even now, this is over. Like, my son is 27 now. So it's a long time ago. But even now, when I tell that tale, and I'm used to telling it, it still just takes me back to that feeling of complete, utter desperation, not knowing what to do. And I didn't know what to do. Didn't know who to talk to. I felt the real isolation of the role. I ended up talking to the school counsellor. And it was in that moment I began to understand something about the power of listening. And if you have someone who's not going to judge you, who's not going to tell you how to do it, who can make space for your emotions, and it's okay not to sort of back them to one side. And it was really in that moment, I feel like a seed was planted. I stayed in headship for another 4 or 5 years, but a seed was planted there around, okay, there's another way to do this job. And there's a way to do it where I can keep my sanity, but also I can stay in connection with what keeps me alive, as to why I've chosen to serve this community when I'm a new mum at the same time. So yeah, there are probably other bits, but that's the main bit of my story, Rowena, as to why I'm here and to why my company, Integrity Coaching, now exists.
Wow, thank you for your vulnerability. I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? So often it takes one thing that tips us when we're already full and can't fit anything else in, and one thing can tip us. And I suppose what I think people might be wondering here is, you said lots of things that you did then you would never do now with what you've learnt and what you know now. What would be some of the key takeaways that you would say, if you're doing this, stop it and try this, or rethink this? What would you be saying to people?
Well, a lot of work that we do with school leaders is, we talk about, you have to understand who you are as a person, first of all, what drives you. Because when you understand what we might call driver behavior, you can press pause and you can then ask yourself, hang on, is this reaction? Because very often in leadership and teaching, we react, we don't respond. So for me, it's about, for example, if I explain to your listeners, and then it will help, and I say what to do and not to do. So, and it comes from the theory of transactional analysis. It talks about 5 drivers. So be perfect, be strong, please others, try hard, and hurry up. And individuals may have a dominant one or a secondary one. Now, I remember when I was not training to be a head, because it wasn't even training, it was before the MPQH. But I remember my mini induction, it was half a day. Can you imagine, just half a day?
Wow.
And that induction, half a day, they got us to do a scenario of giving a difficult message to a member of staff. I wish back then that information around drivers, because what showed up was my please others driver, not my be strong. It was my please other. Now, if you are a please other, you're very good at team playing. You're very good at saying yes to people when actually you want to say no. You're very good at being available to people. You're very good at meeting other people's needs instead of paying attention to your own needs. So what that meant was, when I was a young head teacher and I had to give those difficult messages, or I really needed to carve out time for myself to focus on what I needed to do for the good of the school and for the good of me. Again, I thought, yes, having my open door policy, when heads say now they have open door policy, I'm like, that is not what you want to be doing. You need to find a way to be explicit and comfortable with saying what you need and what you're going to do. So there's things about my advice I would be giving is, really take some time to think about who you are, and in particular, what do you react to? Because the things that we react to very often are signals of where behavior change is needed. where someone gets under our skin and we are irritated, but that same person can behave in the same way to another person, and the other person doesn't react at all. It's not about comparing. It's about understanding, okay, there's something about that individual, and it may be to do with them, but I need to understand why they trigger me. I need to understand what I need to change in my behavior so I can show up differently. So the advice I would give really, Rowena, is understand yourself first. That, yeah, it's a prerequisite for everything. If we understand ourselves better, it makes the job of teaching and leadership that much easier, because the challenges will never go away. But if we understand who we are in the role, it helps.
Hello, I'm Rowena Hicks, and I'm so pleased to introduce this course to you. It's a short, practical, made to fit into your current routine course that I hope is going to help you, because I know time is precious. Staff are frazzled at the end of the day, but actually this fits into what you're doing already. So why me? Why this? Well, I burnt out after 30 years in school as a teacher, a Senko, a specialist teacher, even an advisor, and then a leader. I burnt out. I loved it. I was passionate, but I had to leave. And that just breaks my heart. Teachers are leaving and they're going off sick. This has to stop. So what I've designed is 5 minutes at the start of each staff meeting. You can give your team something small and powerful to build momentum. You'll build their confidence. You'll improve their well-being, their team dynamics, their energy. You reduce stress and overwhelm. And you're building habits to increase productivity, energy, and joy. So each week, there is a short action sheet, because really there isn't going to be any change without action, is there? But there's no extra cost. You're going to be consistently investing in time together to shift how staff feel. Are they seen? Are they valued? Are they heard? Give them a voice. These are small micro-culture changes. You're going to be building your staff team, and you're going to enable them to thrive. This isn't a well-being bolt-on. It's a culture-shifting tool built for real schools by someone who's really walked it. So let's stop staff from leaving, and let's help them to flourish and thrive in their roles. Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, that because I spoke to some head teachers recently, and I said to them, how would it feel for you to maybe go stay at home for half a day a week and do some of these jobs you're not able to do, particularly if they're your most valued strengths and you're using your strengths. But the outcome of that was they said, are you giving us permission to take that time for us? And I'm going, hey, I'm not even a head teacher. Do you need permission? What's the impact for you of doing that? What message do you give to your deputy if you're staying at home for a time? You're saying you trust them. And what it was is them coming together to say, oh, maybe I matter, and maybe it's okay sometimes to put myself first. It's not selfish.
Exactly. There's a lovely quote, just to pick up that bit, not selfish, that I often will quote, is Parker Palmer. I don't know if you know him. He's an social activist from the States. He's in his 80s now, but very wise. One of his books is The Courage to Teach. I wonder if it's on my bookshelf there, but no, it's not. The Courage to Teach. And one of the things that he says is, self-care is never a selfish act. It's simply good stewardship of the only gift that I have. Every time we give true self the care it requires, we do it not only for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we touch. And I just love that quote, because for me, it's just like, it says it all. Says it all.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Because at the core of everything I do in my work in schools is to explain to people, until they understand what it means to value and recognize your own self-worth, you actually can't be the best version of yourself. You can't be your best for those around you either. Because I thought as a deputy that I was helping everybody and supporting the team and the children and the families.
Driver there, Rowena.
Absolutely. I mean, you talking about drivers, that's very strong for me, that pleaser one. But I had this facade on of joy, and I was loving what I did, but I had to appear constantly strong and okay
Mm,
for everybody who
mm,
were telling me that they weren't okay.
yeah.
At the end of the day, I didn't pause. And what you're saying is to
Mm,
stop and reflect, and the power of that. We rush through school, don't we, so fast. It's all
yeah.
reactive, firefighting. What's
Yeah.
going to happen today? And
Yeah.
that's part of the fun of it. But actually,
Mm.
where does that taking time for you and almost giving yourself permission to say, okay, so what is really going on here?
That's exactly it, Rowena. Yeah.
Yeah. How
Mm.
do people do that pause though? If, in an ideal world, we all know that we should all have a coach and, all leaders, I think, should
Mm.
have coaching. It's a
Right.
no-brainer,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
But if they don't have a coach for whatever reason right now,
yeah.
how would you be saying to them, this is how you could pause and reflect and
I would say plan for it. I would say plan for it. I think particularly if if you're a head teacher, you do actually have more sort of agency over your time than perhaps if you're a deputy or a teacher in the classroom where your time is directed. If you're a head teacher, and I have heads who do this, they plan in their diary me time and it's there and they tell their PAs. I know of heads who've planned, okay, this is when I go for a walk. I have to go for a walk to clear my head. So it's not impossible to do, but what it does need is a paradigm shift. Goes back a bit to what you were saying about the heads that you were working with. Again, because the norms in our society and education don't facilitate or encourage a sense of pausing. You've got to be busy all the time. Surely people have got to see me being effective. If I'm not being seen, then that means I'm not being effective. It means I'm not being productive. So what it does require is a paradigm shift to enable individuals to say, oh, actually, I can. And it's okay to plan that time in my diary where I am going to pause and I'm going to give attention to me. And that can be attention to me in a variety of ways, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to make my needs a priority.
is everybody's attention that they need different?
Just tell me a little bit more when you say that, Rowena, just so I fully understand that question.
So when you say I'm going to give attention to me in this, let's say I've put half an hour for me in my diary as a school leader, and actually as a deputy head, I could
Mm,
have done that. That
mm,
wouldn't have been a problem for my head
mm,
teacher, my, CEO. That wouldn't have been an issue.
yeah,
I didn't do it because I didn't
mm,
recognize I needed to do that at the
yeah, yeah.
time. But what I needed to do that be different to what you needed or someone listening.
Oh,
Is
most
everybody's
definitely.
need
Oh,
different?
most definitely, Rowena. None of us are kind of replicas, thank goodness, of each other, Thank goodness we have diversity in the world. So, of course, it would be, yes. And that would be individuals identifying for themselves, okay, I need this time. And in this time, this is what I'm going to do with it, or this is how I'm going to spend it. Yes, for every individual, how they spend their time when they pause will be different.
Like what? Because if I
Mm.
stop, I am such a doer. If
Ah,
I stop, my
yeah,
mind's going
yeah.
ideas, and
Oh,
how do you train people to be able to use that time well?
so for some people, as I said, I know heads will just go for a walk just to clear
Hmm.
their heads. They physically get up, take themselves out of their space. I really do believe in reflection because, as you said, it's about how do we train ourselves. So sometimes it can almost be like just asking yourself three simple questions, almost so where am I now in my thoughts? And I know for many, and again, it's we're human, we all have that inner critic. And so sometimes you might need to be in dialogue with that inner critic because again we know that can pull people down a lot. And so again it can just be a sense of reframing. So what have I done well in the day and what am I going to be celebrating here? So very often then in that pause, if heads don't know what they're going to do at that time, they think, oh, I'm going to be busy, it's impossible, I will encourage reflection. And rather than what I've just done here, give them the questions, because as coaches we believe that people have the answers within themselves. I'll be saying, yeah, and what's the question? On the basis of what we've discussed today and so forth, what's the questions that you might want to be asking yourself in those quiet times? The questions that are bubbling there, are waiting to be asked, but you've never given answered, I should say, but never given yourself the space to do so.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting. So I have a new course just out. It's called
Mm,
5 Minutes to Thrive, and it's 5 minutes. It's like a
mm,
well-being fist bump at the beginning of every staff meeting, right? And the feedback I've had is
mm,
the hardest thing about it. So let's say the week on your inner critic, your thought life.
yeah,
And the hardest bit that teachers and leaders have fed back to
mm,
me for them is they have 1 minute
yeah,
of the 5 minutes where they talk to someone
yes.
about, it might be, what is your thought life like?
Oh, yeah.
What
Okay.
are
Mm,
my strengths?
mm,
And it's thinking about you
yeah,
honestly. And the feedback is it's really hard for us to do that on ourselves. I
mm,
can tell you, Viv, what
yeah,
your strengths are if you're on my team, but
yeah.
to look at my
Mm,
own strengths or
mm,
think, critically and actually factually about what
mm,
really are those 60,000 thoughts going around in my head
yeah,
today.
yeah,
And it's fascinating that we need to train ourselves to be able to look at
yes.
ourselves more, because we're not looking after ourselves, are we?
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right, Arena. And again, in some respects, so I'm not surprised because, again, if you think of the norms with which teachers and education are to operate by, none of it is to do with supporting self-reflection or understanding self. I can think of a school that I was with recently. I'll keep it completely anonymous and completely. But what I was struck by was I'd asked a particular question around something that we were working on. And it's been quite a challenge working with this particular school. And what I realized was, oh my goodness, this is difficult because the norm of coming together and to be your true self, to step out from behind that persona, it's so strong in this school, so strong in a way that actually I haven't observed in many schools that we're working with. But this school in particular makes this work really hard. But what it tells me also is the level of disconnect that you have with yourself and with your team. But again, we normalize disconnection. Yeah, in school, we really, again, it breaks my heart.
Yeah, because it's at the core of everything. And
Yeah.
actually, I love to be able to butt in on that and say, I have
Mm,
just visited the most amazing school where both the teachers, the leaders, and the children are thriving because the relationships are so
mm,
core and safe. And they say we have a no blame culture here. If I make a mistake, it's okay. And they can go and see the CEO anytime they want, and she has 8 or 9 schools, but she's there. And I guess it was teachers saying we're passionate about what we do, and my team helps me. And so these schools do exist,
yeah.
we know they do,
Mm,
and we need to be celebrating how they do it.
yeah. Yeah.
So, Viv, I guess if people want to find out more about you, I know
Mm,
you've got 2 books. Do you want to just tell us the names of your books and maybe a sentence summary on each one?
So the first book, Staying Ahead, is basically what the title says, Staying Ahead, the Stress Management Secrets of Successful School Leaders. And essentially, it is a book that shares really, I suppose, the lessons I've learned as a coach and how school leaders can apply them to their lives so they can be well and they can thrive in the role. The second book is very, very personal. I never imagined I would write this. It's called Learning to Walk in the Dark. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive cancer that's dominant in women of colour. But as a result of that, something miraculous happened, really. I said to you at the very beginning, Marina, how, I view wellness and so forth in terms of wholeness and people bringing their whole selves into the workplace. And yes, in my recovery through cancer, I started to paint. I've never painted before in my whole entire life. Never, ever, ever. But I started to paint. And one of the things I think I might have said to you before we started recording, Rowena, is that I believe that we all have an inner wisdom within us. People talk about it as intuition. And I see it when I'm coaching individuals. I see that inner wisdom. I see that change in demeanor. And I see something that was out of their awareness suddenly come into the conversation. And that's what happened to me with these paintings. With these paintings, I would often with school leaders talk about the soul's journey, but I had a theoretical understanding of that. And the soul's journey is basically, we all go through it. You went through it, Marina, you said, about your breakdown. It's when life suddenly changes for us. We have no awareness that it's going to change. Because if we did, the ego would stop that change from it really would, because we're being pulled into the descent. We're being pulled away from the unknown. And I would say something alchemical happens in that. It's about a process of transformation. And it's about living in that deep, unknown liminal space. But then with time, and Marina, I'm going to hazard a guess, we don't know each other very well, but you do this podcast now because of something that happened in that time where you retrieved wisdom. And so you came back out into the world. And with that wisdom, you're now putting back out. And that's what my painting showed to me. It was like, oh my God, because I can't even begin to tell you how frightening and a scary place that was. But the paintings were revealing to me that I was on a deep soul journey. And they revealed to me that actually there are ways to understand that. There are coaching questions that we can ask myself. I'm still, I suppose, in sometimes a bit of awe about it all, really, because the book came together very quickly. It was like I was coaching myself from the inside out with coaching questions that I would put to readers that they could help navigate their own soul journeys or dark nights of the soul. So yes, that was more, I'm sorry, that wasn't one sentence, but there was just so much in terms of this latest book that is so personal, but also I believe can help school leaders, anyone actually, because we all go through dark nights of the soul, and help us to engage at a much deeper level with what's being asked to be brought out of us into the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, Viv, if you might come on for a sort of a follow-on episode in a couple of months, if you've got time, to maybe talk about both of those books, because I'm actually intrigued by both. Perhaps I can read them both before then, and we could then have a discussion, because I think it's what educators across the board are needing to hear. It's all an additional part of what you're talking about in the pause and the listening to yourself and valuing yourself. If people would like to get in contact with you or find out more about you, Viv, where would they go?
Okay, probably the two best places: LinkedIn at Viv Grant, so easy to find, or the company Integrity Coaching. If you want to go online and find out more about the services we provide, it's www.integritycoaching.co.uk.
Okay, that's great. And we'll pop those into the show notes anyway. So thank you so much for your time and your honesty and your wisdom, Viv. That's amazing. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Rowena.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.